back to our study. Do you like these online Bible lessons? I'm not sure yet. Lots of people love them. Lots of people hate them. I'm still kind of on the fence. But I'll have to admit, when COVID-19 first started making all of this necessary, I wasn't ready. I was one of those back in December of 2019 that when we first started hearing the rumblings from Asia, and people started asking, what are you going to do when this crosses the Pacific and comes to the U.S.? What are you going to do? What's your church going to do? And all those kind of questions got going. I was thinking, oh, it ain't going to happen. It's not going to be a big deal. Boy, were we ever wrong. It's been a big thing. And it's not just the pandemic. It's touched off tremendous social change. And a bunch of us have had to learn how to do video posts and video classes and social media and Zoom and a whole host of other things that we had ignored before. It's been a big deal. But some of my favorite Bible classes I've ever taught have come in situations and things that were not of my choosing. Settings that were something other than normal, if we will. So maybe this is one of those events too. And I hope it's been a blessing to you. One time I got to teach a series of Bible classes in a juvenile detention center. The detention center was in the county courthouse that sat across the parking lot and street from our church building. And you could look out the window of the classroom we were sitting in and see my office building right across the way. And there was the parking lot, and there was my little green Ford Ranger truck. Some of them in class thought it was cute. Some of them thought I needed to sell it and get a real truck. One day we had a new student in class, and this guy had an attitude. He had an attitude. I'm not sure why he was in class that day, or so I thought, because he just seemed kind of agitated the whole time. He had a huge chip on his shoulder. And in the middle of the class, all of a sudden he demanded an answer. He said, "It sounds to me like you're saying we have to go to church in order to go to heaven. Is that what you're saying?" Then he added, "My grandmother says it isn't true, that you don't have to go to church to go to heaven." And then he didn't even wait for my answer. He just stomped out of the classroom, went back to his cell, I presume. He was upset. Then I got thinking about it, and I was upset because he was in juvenile detention for stealing cars. He wasn't going to always be there. He knew which car was mine. And if he's mad at me, and he knows how to hotwire a green truck, he had a lot of experience in chop shops and that sort of thing, and I was a little worried. I was glad the next week when he was back at class, smiling, joking around with the rest, and enjoying our Bible study. But what about his question? He asked a challenging question, one that he would have found there would have been a lot of people that would have agreed with his grandmother, right? Was his grandmother right? Do we have to go to church in order to go to heaven? Do you have to be a part of the church in order to serve Jesus and to be right with Jesus? Well, in the end, as we've already noted, Jesus is the one who has provided us a way to be saved. He is the avenue for which God has brought salvation to the world, and he is the head of the church. Colossians chapter 1, verse 15 through 23. Jesus is both our salvation and the head of the church. And since he is the source of salvation and the head of the church, he's the one to ask, right? What do the scriptures teach? What does the Bible say about church and serving him? Can you be a Christian and not be a part of the church? Well, before we go any further, let's clarify the question a little bit. And I'm not trying to do a bait and switch here, sleight of hand illusion. But I do want us to focus in on what he was really asking. Because a lot of times when people say, do I have to go to church in order to serve God? Do I have to go to church to be saved? Do I have to go to church to be heaven? There's a couple of different things they could be saying. And so we need to answer them specifically. Now, it could be that when his grandmother said that you don't have to be a Christian or you don't have to go to church to go to heaven, his grandmother could have meant, I can be a Christian and go to heaven without gathering with people to worship on Sunday mornings. You don't have to gather with people and worship and sing and all of that. You don't have to do that in order to go to heaven. That could have been what she meant. Or the other thing that she could have meant was that in order that you don't have to be a part of a gathering of people and a congregation of people who serve God together. You don't have to be a part of that. You can, in order to go to heaven, you can be somewhat of a freelance believer, not tied to any group or any congregation. Just be a good person and believe in God, and that's all that God really wants. That could be what she meant. Now then, if his grandmother meant the first, we're going to deal with that in an upcoming lesson, I think the next lesson in this series. But for a few minutes, I want to consider the second one. What does the Bible say about the second possibility? Can a person be part of the church without being part of a particular congregation? Can they be a Christian and part of the church without gathering together in a congregation? Can they be a Christian without even being part of the church? That's what we want to consider. Now, the last possibility there, can we be Christians without part of the church? Well, if you look back at the very first lesson, we established that the church is just a collective term for Christians. The church is a covey of Christians, a herd or a mob. That's what we talked about. Therefore, when you become a Christian, you become one of the mob. You're one of those mass of people that is now collectively known as the church. Paul addressed his letter to the Corinthians to the church, those who are God's holy people among those everywhere who call on the name of the Lord. 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 1 through 4. So, to claim to be a Christian and not part of the church is self-contradictory. Christians are the church is the Christians. The church is the collective term for all the Christians. If you're a Christian, you are part of the church. That one's fairly easy. But what about congregations? What about congregations? When you think of congregations, now there's congregations all over in our communities. Every street corner, has a different church, it seems like. And when we say churches, we mean congregations. There's a congregation here, a congregation there. It is a gathering, a congregating of people. Do you have to be a part of this one congregate group, this local bunch who worship together and study together and generally serve God together? Do you have to be a part of that? Well, this series on the church is called Together, so that probably tips my hand a little bit. But let me see if I can back it up. There are lots of passages that we could look at. 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 22, Peter says, "Now that you have purified yourselves by obeying the truth, so that you have sincere love for one another, love one another deeply from the heart." And if you read the whole section, Peter ties our salvation to this bond of love that we have for one another. And later on, he's going to talk about how God gives us gifts in order to serve one another over in chapter 4. John 17 and verse 20, Jesus prays that everyone who believes in him because of the apostles' preaching will be one. That they'll be tied together, united together. Those are important passages. But the passage I want to focus on in this lesson is 1 Corinthians chapter 12, beginning in verse 12. Paul, writing to that same church at Corinth that we started out talking about, says, just as a body, though one, has many parts, but all of its parts form one body, so it is with Christ. For we were all baptized by one Spirit, so as to form one body, whether Jews or Gentiles, slave or free, and we were all given the one Spirit to drink. Even so, the body is not made up of one part, but many. Now, if the foot should say, because I'm not a hand, I do not belong to the body, it would not for that reason stop being part of the body. And if the ear should say, because I'm not an eye, I don't belong to the body, it would not for that reason stop being part of the body. Then now verse 21, he goes the other direction. He says, the eye can't say to the hand, I don't need you. And the head cannot say to the feet, I don't need you. Verse 25, he said, so that there should be no division in the body, but its parts should have equal concern for each other. If one part suffers, every part suffers with it. If one part is honored, every part rejoices with it. Now you are the body of Christ, and each one of you is a part of it. He says you have become added to a body, and those parts in the body are connected. If you want to do a study to find out just how that is, tonight, turn off all the lights in the house, and in the middle of the night, go walking through your house. As soon as your toe finds the chair leg or whatever it is that you did not know was there, you will discover all the parts of your body are connected. They all hurt, it seems like, when the toe hurts. Or at least they all react when you kick the chair leg. Your body is made up of one part, and they are all connected. It throws us a little bit because I think in the King James and some of the others it says the body is made up of members, and we think of members like a member of a club. But the word here is not members like that. The word here for members is organs, body parts. We are one body, and all of us are an organ or a member or a part of that body. So what's Paul's point? He says everyone who was baptized into Christ was baptized into a church, into a body, and was connected to all the other members of that body. Not in just some theoretical, esoteric, philosophical fashion, but in function. These parts of the body take care of each other and serve each other, and they do things together in order to accomplish things. You hear people say, well, God didn't say form a congregation. And I agree. But the only practical way that you can be the church and to do what the church is to do is to have this body relationship with other Christians. And when you start doing that, you're going to form some type of congregational life. You're going to form this gathering together. And isn't that the way we do everything? My wife and I have recently restored a travel trailer. One of the first things we do is we go out there and we find other people that have restored travel trailers. We find out there's this group that they get together all over the country in these gatherings of people who have restored travel trailers. You know, Alabama football fans are congregating with other Alabama football fans. Oklahoma football fans, yeah, we've got ties with other Oklahoma football fans. I was driving down the road the other day, saw an OU sticker on a truck, and I thought, I got to know that guy because we had this tie. You see, we join ourselves together with people who are of like mind and like heart and like interest and who have some same things. That is a natural thing to do, and in the church, God uses that to build His body made up of His members. And as you read on through 1 Corinthians, Paul talks about that each part of the body has been given gifts. And they were given not for individual glory and achievement, but rather they were given for the common good. There is one body and we're all members of it. Now Paul, when he has a good metaphor or analogy, he's not above reusing it, and so he uses this analogy again over in Ephesians 4. He says, as a prisoner of the Lord, then I urge you to live a life worthy of the calling you have received. Be completely humble and gentle. Be patient, bearing with one another in love. Make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace. There is one body and one Spirit, just as you were called to one hope when you were called. One Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is over all and through all and in all. He says, just as there's only one God in the world, and there's only one Spirit who lives in each of you, there is only one body, and you are all part of it. And in this letter, Paul paints Christians as children of light, living in the middle of a great darkness, battling Satan, battling demons, battling the spiritual forces of darkness. And how are you ever going to be successful in that battle? How are you ever going to overcome? Paul says, down in verse 11 through 16 of Ephesians 4, that our ability to withstand the darkness and to be children of light, our ability to grow in that, happens within community. Part of what makes us stronger and helps us stay light is that we can speak the truth to one another and work together. And we can serve together and work together to grow into the fullness of Christ. It is this working together that makes us mature. Because in this battle, to be light, you're going to have to do some very difficult things. You're going to have to take some difficult stands. You're going to have to breathe deep and summon some courage sometimes. And it's really strange that sometimes in our society we think people can do that all on their own, that they can take these heroic stands, make hard changes, stand up against drugs and sexual immorality and social problems and loneliness and hurt, and we expect them just to kind of somehow do it all alone, to do it on their own. Paul says the thing that keeps us from being blown around by every strange wind of thought and doctrine that comes around is the fact that we do it within community, in relationship with other believers. People get amazed that the drug dealer or the drug addict, goes to prison, they get clean, they get straight, they come out, and before you know it, they're back into the drugs. Why? Well, usually it's because the only friends they had were their druggy friends. Wouldn't it be better if they could have came out to a group of people who had thrown their arms around them, who had done like Jesus, who extends acceptance and community, and then out of that encourages them and gives them strength to grow into more of what they want to be, what God wants them to be. No wonder the Hebrew writer calls upon those Christians there in Hebrews 10, verse 23 and following, he says, don't give up getting together with your brothers and sisters in Christ. In fact, as you see the trouble coming, as you see the day approaching, as it grows worse, not only do you not give up, you need to do it more. You need to spend more time with your brethren, the harder it gets. These people were scared, shrinking back from the persecution, worried about what's going to happen. It was getting hard. And some of them had kind of quit gathering with the brethren. The Hebrew writer says, don't do that. Not only do you need to do it, you need to do it more. Not only do you need to do it in order to be encouraged, but also so that you can be a channel of encouragement to others. I understand church can be difficult. Church people can be difficult. I can be difficult. Church people, we can do stupid things, even sinful things, and sometimes it hurts, and sometimes it makes relationships strained. It's like family, even to the point that sometimes, like we've said in our earlier lesson, the girl says, Lord, I'm amazed that you love everybody, because we've only got 5 people in my family, and we can't do it. Well, church is that way sometimes. None of us are perfect. And sometimes those imperfections make it hard and make life hard for others. But in the end, the church is more resilient and stronger than any one of us. It's less likely to go off into some crazy world or some idea that's going to get in trouble. Churches are hard to change, and for leadership, it makes us crazy sometimes. That you can't get the church to change, go a different direction, do something different. But it's that same resiliency to the forces around it that make the church strong and stable and unbroken by the world. And it make it just stronger than the rest of us. You need church. I think about an elderly lady who was struggling. Her home was weathered and beaten, aging, and she didn't have the money to fix it. Not to get it painted. Nor did she have the physical ability to do it herself. Furthermore, being a widow, she just got lonely sometimes, living alone. And she felt isolated and forgotten sometimes. So can you imagine what it meant to her one day when a truck pulled up with a bunch of men from church who jumped out with their rollers and ladders and paint in hand and went to work on her house? Yeah, see, we need those kind of moments. We need to be the receiver, and we need to be the givers. There's some joy, and those men had something, a tie that helped them as they did that together. You know, who's going to make it when they get out of prison? Those who are tossed out to prove themselves on their own, or those who have some righteous friends who put their arms around them and help them? On some days, we imagine ourselves self-sufficient. We can do it. Our culture tells us we are self-sufficient. Everything we need, we have. Don't buy the lie. Not only do we need other people, the people around us shape us. They're a key to creating who we're going to be. Our lives, our priorities, our values, even how we think about the world around us, very much shaped by those who we live around day in and day out. Here's the truth. People ask, if you're a good person and serve God, can you go to heaven without going to church? And it's an interesting theoretical question. But it really doesn't have much grounding in the real world. Without church ties, without those connections to other people that'll encourage you and be there with you and walk with you to heaven, you're not going to serve God very long. Eventually, you'll just slide back into the world. You might perform a kind of a socially acceptable kind of Christianity. But when those times come in which you really need strength to serve God and you got to stick your neck out and stand against the winds of the world, you need some brethren who are holding you up in the midst of that wind so that you can stand. You need Christians to back you up. You need that community. You say, oh, I can do it. I don't think you can. And even if you could, the next generation, the ones you're supposed to be blessing and helping, where are they going to get it? You need a church community. You need a church family. We'll pick up next time the question of, well, if you're in that church family, do you got to go to church on Sunday mornings when the preacher's dull? Or the song leader doesn't quite have it? Can you just stay home? We'll gather with that around that question next time. See you then.